Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Learned Live Lounge. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Rob Jarrett. Rob is a lawyer and the founder of Size 7 Law, as well as the co-founder of Allegro. Today, we're going to be talking a bit about you, Rob, about your career, a bit about Allegro and what that's all been doing, and then if there's some time, we might take a bit of a ponderance on what we're seeing in the market at the moment. We both work a lot with lots of GCs, and it'd be good to just get your input as well on what's going on there. But thank you for joining me. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm very good, thanks. It's good to see
Good.
you. Really appreciate you having me on.
No worries at all. It's good to have you here. Thank you for making the time. Well, look, let's kick this off then. Tell us a bit about yourself. I mean, I guess a bit about your early career and what's led you to doing, if I can say, doing something a bit different, doing something like Size 7 and doing something like Allegro.
Sure. I try to run through it fairly quickly so that I don't.
Take your time. We've got time.
So I'm not one of these people that always knew they wanted to be a lawyer.
Mm.
It was kind of decided fairly late on. I did a law degree because I was told that was a good degree to do, and then decided to go down the trainee solicitor route. I timed it very poorly and finished law school in the middle of the recession. So getting a job was tricky, to say the least. But I ended up in a role at a firm called Pitman's in Reading doing defendant insurance as a paralegal. I was there for 2.5 years, and during that time I was given a training contract. So I qualified there in their media tech and IP team in the London office. And so I was working quite closely with someone that specialized in technology. So I basically became a technology contracts and commercial contracts lawyer. Moved in-house earlier than planned, circumstantial. Basically all of the partners in the department were headhunted to go to bigger and better firms. Found myself needing to move on. And at the time, the Royal Bank of Scotland's internal recruitment team contacted me on LinkedIn. So I hadn't ever thought of going into financial services or working at a bank, but that's where I ended up, obviously a big name. And I spent most of my career in-house. So I spent a few years at the Royal Bank of Scotland and then a couple of years at Aviva. Ended up as the head of legal for technology and broadcast operations at ITV for a couple of years. And basically got a little bit fed up with the corporate world. It felt like opportunities to progress were going to be a bit limited because lots of people had been there a long time. And I just thought, I want to try something completely different. So I ended up working at a small but established legal consultancy called TLB, the Law Boutique. And I was there a year. It didn't work out. It wasn't for me. And so I thought, you know what, I'm gonna keep things varied and stress-free and interesting, and I'm going to go down the interim route. And I ended up with a mat cover role at TikTok, 3 Lawyers on Demand. But most of these big companies are worried about IR35, rightly or wrongly. And so I realized that most of these opportunities were going to be salaried via payroll, and it wasn't going to be as lucrative as I'd hoped. And I'd already come upon the admin behind the scenes. I'd set up a limited company, bank account, got an accountant on board, done other bits and pieces. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to give it a go. I'm going to try and go out on my own legal consultancy and see how I get on. I was fortunate in that the mat cover role at TikTok ultimately transitioned to a part-time direct role with them. So contracting through my company. And also at the same time, the legal consultancy that I'd worked at, TLB, decided to close its doors and cease operating. So there were a few former clients that needed a new service provider. So it's kind of great timing. I contacted them just to pick up a few clients straight away. So I've been doing that since about March 2024, and it's been going really well. I personally, as I say, very quickly became quite busy, which I know is fortunate and circumstantial, and not everyone has that kind of luck with this. And so I've been subcontracting bits and pieces of work to other solo legal consultants that are out there and contact me and are looking for additional work and help. And one of those legal consultants that I'd worked with in 2024 approached me with the Allegro opportunity. So that's where I am today. Allegro is a flex legal talent marketplace that we launched towards the end of last year. I'll pause there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you. No, thank you. And I was listening intently because it's always interesting for me. Obviously, my line of work, I look at people's careers and what they do, and we've seen this shift. You know, this the idea about going into kind of consultancy work, you know, years and years ago, it was something you did right near the end of your career when you'd kind of seen everything and done everything you wanted, and you were starting to wind down, and you were going, okay, well, I've got this nice network, and I'll do some services for these guys and these guys, and actually, again, for some time now, we've noticed lawyers a lot earlier on in their career, a lot younger. And that's not to say that you were young when you did it. I know you'd had a decent chunk of in-house experience under your belt already, but that actually this was a really viable path to then take on and do and really get stuck into. Lots of consultancies setting up. Varying levels of success, I think, as well, and we've seen that the market's been really dynamic. I think around that we'll talk about that, but it makes it's a really interesting kind of move to do it. And like you say, you said, I think you were sort of lucky, but I'm a strong believer that people tend to make their own luck. But for whatever reason, you had a good client base there, and that workflow ended up being in excess of what you personally could manage. So it makes sense that you'd start to collaborate with others, and lots of other people started to do this in this space as well. So, I mean, look, I'm really interested. Tell me a bit more about Allegro, because this is not, as far as I understand it, this is not just another kind of to the extent that we can call it standardized consultancy service where it's just, you know, a group of lawyers together with a brand that's saying, look, we provide legal services. I think there's a bit more to it as well, and there's some technology behind this too, which is quite interesting. So yeah, I'm keen to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. We think it's fairly different and fairly unique to the UK at least. So it's a flexible legal talent marketplace, and we basically provide a platform whereby a client, whether they're a scaling business that doesn't have any lawyers and needs additional legal support, or more likely an in-house legal team that needs some additional flexible support, whether that's fractional, you know, part-time or interim for mat cover, sick leave projects, that kind of thing, or just ad hoc bits of work. They can go onto the platform, very easily and quickly interact with an AI chatbot. It asks them all the right questions to draw out all the information it needs to produce a scope of work. So you immediately save time having to contact an ALSP or, you know, a law firm, whatever it be, and you save time having to write a detailed job description. It kind of does all that within a couple of minutes. And then it matches the request with relevant lawyers in the database. So people like me that have set up on their own. So solo legal practitioners, some might be part of smaller law firms or smaller legal consultancies, but it's generally people like me that have gone out as solo lawyers and are looking for additional work. And it matches them based on jurisdiction and practice area. They're automatically notified of these opportunities via email, and they can go on and make a proposal. So the client within hours has up to 10 proposals from former in-house, senior, very experienced lawyers that are sort of ready and willing to go. The idea being that they can then interact to agree scope and fees directly via the platform. They contract directly so that the client relationship is between, you know, the client and that solo lawyer. And we take a referral fee. That's how it works. So the platform is free to use for clients, and there's no payment from their side. And yeah, basically we speed up that whole process that might otherwise take a few weeks.
Some time to do.
Um,
Yeah, it's interesting. I think what I like about it is firstly the utilization of some of the new technology, because I mean everyone's sort of packing elements of this into any kind of product or service offering that they can give, but this is, if I may say, in like a positive way, it's quite simplistic. It's not as part of a sort of ingrained product where it's trying to triage the legal issues beyond translating it so that it essentially it formulates a requisition that then lawyers and then the other side to this is actually for the lawyers on the platform. There's a really nice level of control that then gives them, and visibility, which you don't always get. And look, I'll say this openly, sitting on, you know, as part of this ecosystem on the recruitment side, I talk to many lawyers that are, between roles and doing consultancy work or considering doing consultancy work, and they struggle to, when you're looking at the market, you don't know, if you just look at a job board, are all these live? Are all of these recent? Are they viable? What's really the demand here? Because often those requisitions, they're written by either talent acquisition teams, but you don't always get the kind of pertinent information you want, and you've got no visibility on budgets. Whereas this kind of flips it the other way. Firstly, it gives them all the access, and it gives them the control to say, well, look, these are my costings. Like this is where it needs to go. The one thing they need to clue up on is what the kind of appropriate charge rates are. But again, not speak on my behalf, a half decent recruiter should be able to give you some of that, and I'm sure that's something you guys help with as well.
Yeah, we can give them a steer on that, but also they're already, some of them at least, are doing work elsewhere, so they've already sort of established their daily rates, or whatever it might be towards. I think the attraction for legal professionals is, and I've experienced this from Size 7, the legal consultancy, when I'm trying to find people and subcontract the work, they can set their own rates. So they know what the referral fee is. It's all fully transparent. They set their own rates and they know what they're giving away. And they should be able to retain more money because obviously Allegro doesn't have the same overheads as a big ALSP. So, the margin isn't applied there. They're contracting directly, which I know from subcontracting the work is something they want. Most of these lawyers generally want to own the client relationship, which I completely understand. So there's that attraction too. And there are a lot of, as we kind of touched on before, and perhaps we'll get onto it later, there are a lot of people going down this route. For, some forced down this route because they've been made redundant for whatever reason and they're struggling to get a new role, or some they want to go down this route for the flexibility and the lifestyle and potentially more money and all those things. But it's difficult to win the work because there are so many people doing this kind of thing, and then you're also competing with law firms and established ALSPs and all sorts of other technology, AI.
Yes,
there's a lot of competition out there, and it's very difficult for these solo lawyers to win the work. So this is essentially just bringing opportunities to them. There's less marketing effort and spend on their part. So we think there's a lot of attraction there for legal professionals, and we've got, a really decent number of legal professionals signed up.
And I'm not surprised actually in terms of the attraction on that, because it's not there's not a big ask. And look, you touched on this point. I want to talk about it a bit. We've seen this no, I will call it kind of an explosion of the ALSP market. I think my humble opinion on this here is that there were some very smart people that recognized a gap between what we define as traditional legal services from law firms and then just hiring people and having them in-house, or hiring people on a sort of temporary basis. There was this middle ground of workflow that needed to be dealt with in a new way, with new dynamic pricing and a more holistic approach to it. That kind of just really took off, and then the vast majority of the law firms went, oh goodness, there's a whole market here and we're going to fall behind if we don't get in with it. I think there's to give a few examples, the likes of Pinsent Mason's Vario, Simmons & Simmons Adaptive. Those were probably the earliest versions. Yes. Or, I'm probably going to be corrected on this, but it was some of the earliest versions of the law firm saying, look, we need to provide this as a very distinct and kind of alternate service. It's different from our traditional offering, but, has the same kind of branding and everything behind it, and the quality. So that really took off. And now every law firm, to an extent, has a version of this. And you're right, and this is ignoring even the whole kind of legal tech and all of that stuff that's kind of filtering through as well. And a bigger influx of candidates, I'll agree with that are looking at it whether because it's an interesting way of them running your career, or because the market's been up and down and there's been people on the market for various reasons. I do think, and I want to get your opinion on this, I think we've seen it on the other side as well. So although this has all kind of been set up, it's fundamentally because the demand has been there. I think GCs for years now have been looking at the way they procure those legal services in a different way, even though the vast majority of them, because by its very nature, they've come from traditional law firms, they know what that model is, and they've got panels and they use them for big transactions and specific things they want to do, that they're looking for a more cost-effective way of doing things, a more flexible or kind of on-demand way of doing things. And that's been a huge growth area, which sits really nicely with when you kind of took to this market and what you've been doing. I don't know if you've seen the same level of demand. I think it's been probably both levels have grown at a similar pace.
Yeah, it's tricky. I think it's really mixed. You've got, I think the early sort of ALSPs, the big established ones like LOD and Axiom that have been around for a long time, saw an opportunity initially to provide interim lawyers for the likes of mat cover, sick leave projects, that kind of thing. And it's obviously been very, very successful for them. And they were ahead of the game. I think the law firms that have set up those kind of arms to deal with this kind of work did so in response to those big ALSPs, but in response to client demand for secondees. So there's that sort of double approach there. I think law firms are well suited for the high risk, high value, generally one-off matters, less well suited to your day-to-day commercial work, for example, where you really need a good understanding of the business or to kind of be embedded with the business, which is why it works so well for in-house lawyers, obviously, and that market increased massively over recent years. But works so well for fractional lawyers as well, because you can work for a handful of clients at a time and get really embedded. But I still think there's, as much as there's a lot of people looking at these flexible, more cost-effective options, there are still a lot of in-house lawyers that just go to their law firm. They've got a go-to law firm and they go, and that's just the way they do things, and perhaps less familiar with these other options, or are just comfortable using their law firm, even though perhaps not the best fit for this type of work, or probably more expensive. And then you've got people that default to hiring as well. They just we're really, really busy. We need another person, and that that can be the right option, of course. But there is that middle ground where do we have enough work to fulfill a full-time role? Is it the right sort of work that we want to retain or need to retain in-house? Do we have the budget for a full-time person? Often not. Or that budget dictates it has to be a junior person that might not be the right fit. They may be, but it depends on the work. And another big factor is, do you want to recruit someone who you're then going to have to, or ought to, properly manage, train, develop? Or do you just need to offload some work to someone that can hit the running? And different people running different teams will have different needs and different preferences. Some people really, really want to grow an in-house team and really like the people side of things and want to manage and train and develop people. And there's definitely a need for that work and that person. And then others, if you're a sole GC who's drowning in work, I don't think recruiting a new lawyer, for example, would be the right option, because, it's not going to relieve a huge amount of the workload, but it's also not necessarily the best option for that junior lawyer, because they're not going to perhaps get the support and training and development that they need.
And often budgets dictate that's where it's going, because we've all, sorry, carry on. We've all seen it.
I just think there's this real mix of, that these types of other options are becoming more and more known, but it still, for me, feels early days, other than your very big LODs and Axioms, which were traditionally more suited to interim. They're going down the fractional route and they offer managed legal services and that kind of thing. But I still think there's a lot of catching up to do for these other more flexible options. And I still think a lot of in-house people are still kind of have their mindset on law firms or hiring. There's a lot of awareness raising to do to make them aware of those.
Showcase the alternatives. Yeah. There's a few things you've raised there. And one really important point, I think, which you and I are disadvantaged on here, because we're in roles where we work with and have exposure to lots of different legal teams, at various points, and lots of different GCs, and we see where the prevailing market is. And I think you're right on that there's still a lot of education to do around this area, but we're not seeing all of those examples where people have just got a setup that they've had for 20 years. And that's not to say there's not, innovation, but fundamentally, I go to this law firm for this thing, this law firm for this thing. and just the idea that there's a whole industry now that's developed in the last 5, 6, 7-ish years, certainly this part of it, that gives you something really alternative. And to your other point on hiring, and look, I say this very openly, as an in-house legal recruiter, I think sometimes businesses look at the hire, as you say, sometimes there's an issue of sort of empire building, where I think it's just a sort of the hire on the basis that, well, I'm supposed to grow a team, that's what you do. And sometimes it's as a knee-jerk, it's a permanent solution for a temporary issue.
I,
And
to be
that's the problem.
when I was at ITV, that was what good looked like to me. That's what success looked like to me. Having a team.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I just wasn't aware of all these other options at the time. And, I like
yeah,
a lot of in-house people now. I I was very busy. I was recruited as a head of legal, which, based on my experience at Aviva and RBS, was like, you've got this established team doing the work and focusing on strategy and learning and development and all these other good things. The reality was, when I went to ITV, it was me as head of legal in name, and I had one part-time person supporting me 2 days a week, and I
you're
was
just getting all the
living the
work
business.
done.
So I was
Yeah,
doing a lot of BAU. It wasn't really the role I was expecting, but my immediate reaction was, I'm crazy busy, I need to hire someone, and went and spent a year trying to justify that, and before I could
yeah,
even start hiring. And I probably still would have needed someone, but there was a lot I could have done before that, to
to really
get
take the pressure
operations,
off.
take the pressure off, say
Yeah,
work, stop being so helpful to
yeah,
everyone, put different processes in place, explore legal tech, uh,
and to
and
give
look at.
yeah,
I did eventually get someone who was effectively a fractional lawyer, although that wasn't the name for it then, and it was a legal consultant that was helping me kind of 25 hours a month. And that made a massive difference, especially, and
yeah.
kind of relieved a lot of the workload while I then continued to pursue the hiring option. So
Absolutely, and that's the challenge when you're in it as well. It's actually having the clearance to then know what you can and what you want to do with it. And I should probably, as an aside here, make a point that I don't think the kind of permanent in-house legal industry is in trouble here. I
no,
think because it's certainly problematic for me, but it's problematic for a lot of lawyers as well, because it's a really important career path. And look, it's where you cut your teeth and develops your experience. And I don't think that's the point here. What a lot of this development of the industry is doing, it's enhancing what functions can do. And actually, what's great about it is when we do get to a point where there's need for additional, and not the temporary, but the integrated, the permanent headcount. And as far as I'm concerned, it's far less about workflow. There's a million different ways you can kind of tackle workflow now. This is about having someone who's integrated in the business with a long-term view to it as well, and a vested interest in what that business is doing, and a vested interest in building all those internal relationships and doing that. And that's when you're prompted to really make those hires, and that can be at various different levels. We do also need to recognize that, if we want to keep this industry full of really good and talented people, we need to make sure that we've got space for our junior lawyers. And I say junior, maybe we're talking 3+ PQE, but in-house structures. Otherwise, everyone's sat in private practice, I guess, until they're 10 PQE and then moving over, and that's fine. But you need that dynamism. But I think there's so much space for junior lawyers coming through now to leverage technology even better, and the way that they work and what they do, especially in-house. I like the idea of seeing a bunch of 3 PQE lawyers who've had decent training at a good law firm, and then they've come through actually a fractional, they're on Allegro or something, and they've done some fractional projects to just really push them outside a comfort zone and learn a particular area and do really well with that. That kind of holistic experience, I think, gives them a lot more to then take into a really successful in-house career if they want it, and to make really successful GCs. So I see that all of these changes, influences in the market, it's a net positive for the industry itself, and actually for GCs who, and let's not kid ourselves, you and I know they're always running with, I haven't got enough budget for this, I can't do that, I can't do this. It's never been the rich function that just gets what it
no,
wants all the time, because for whatever way we cut it, and I don't agree with this, but it's still seen as a cost center fundamentally. So it's always having to balance that.
Yeah, exactly. There is always that challenge of demonstrating the value to the business and not kind of just preventing risks or saying no, which is obviously unfair.
Mm.
Yeah, look, we wouldn't have senior lawyers without junior lawyers, so there obviously has to be a space for them. I think they will absolutely be better enabled by technology. There are still lots of established, bigger in-house legal teams where they might get more support than were they to go straight into a junior role at,
Yeah,
supporting one GC. That does exist. Like, of course it exists, and they might be getting amazing experience. They will be getting very hands-on experience. I just think those GCs need to be able to carve out the time to give them the proper training and development they need,
yeah,
so that it's a success for both of them. But yeah, really interestingly, I read something from LexisNexis that said 1/3 of lawyers in the UK will be legal consultants or solo practitioners as
mm,
of so. I think there's something like 200,000 qualified solicitors in the UK. So that's a lot that have gone down the legal, a huge number that have gone down the legal consultancy or sole legal practitioner route.
mm.
Uh, it partly demonstrates, kind of where the in-house market's gone. It partly demonstrates that people want this flexible lifestyle. And yeah, just the growing awareness of the different alternatives that are out there. But
Yeah, it's an interesting. I've seen I saw similar statistics last year, and you can see the growth on this too. It's as you said, I think overall net positive. I think you're right about, and one thing that maybe some people listening and or watching this, it from the viewpoint of I'm looking at consultancy work for the first time, or it's a market I'm considering. It can be a little daunting because I think it feels highly competitive. And I guess that's kind of the point. There is a high number of people that are looking at these kind of models and these setups, but I see what you think, but I would generally still maintain that for a lot of businesses, actually finding that good flexible resource, the one that just works and hits the ground running, it's still quite challenging. It's not that they've just got complete pick of the crop all the time.
no, absolutely. And as I say, they don't always know that this is an option or who to go to where they are.
Yeah.
So hopefully Allegro helps with that. But
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, I always say, I speak to a lot of people that are looking to go down this route, and I advise them to try to start as I did with an interim role or at least a part-time interim role to start with through a more established player. So you've got that
Mm,
regular income whilst you try to get your own client base going. Obviously, some people may be coming from private practice with, a client following, so that's a different situation. But a lot of them are like me. They've spent most of their career in-house and obviously have no clients. And then, it's, it is very daunting to go from, 10 plus years in-house to then trying to start on your own. But I think the
mm.
changing market will obviously help these people get the clients, and you only need a few to really make it worthwhile. And that there
Yeah.
won't be, going back to kind of the in-house market, the in-house teams, as awareness continues to increase about legal ops and legal
Mhm.
tech,
Mhm.
and continues to be cost constraints, as well as all these other flexible alternatives, people will be running leaner legal teams where they're kind of owning legal and deciding what to outsource and who else does what, whether that's law firm, big ASP, fractional lawyers, etc. you know, they'll be dealing with the most strategic matters internally and sort of board advisory. They'll be dealing with the higher volume, higher value matters that need someone with specialist in-house business knowledge to be able to do that work on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Just, I'm still with TikTok, huge regulatory teams, for example, huge data privacy teams, for
Mm.
example. And then keep that sort of higher volume, higher value specialist work in house and train the people up to do that type of work. And then something like your procurement contracts or your sales contracts, where, yeah, you need a decent understanding of the business, but you can quickly pick that up. And if you're an experienced former in-house lawyer, you can very quickly
You can
just
pick it up within one.
be sufficient with
Yeah.
those contracts and only have to escalate certain things. And then obviously, and law firms are never going to go away. Of course, there is still absolutely a place for them. For those, really big ticket, high risk, high value items, and
Yeah.
mostly one-off things like corporate M&A, litigation, that kind of thing. I think that's where they're best placed, and not as useful, frankly, for the day-to-day commercial work.
As a catch-all. Yeah, which I think we're seeing, and look, the law firm. This is a big industry in the UK, especially, and the law firms have been around a long time as well, and they've adapted and innovated around this. Or some of them, I don't speak on behalf of all of them, but a lot of them have adapted and innovated around this for these exact reasons. I think you're spot on in your opinion on that. I'm very conscious of our time as well, but let's do some concluding thoughts, I suppose. So the market this year, and where we see particular growth areas, whether this is in relation to fractional or even more generally, what's your, if I can get you to sort of open a crystal ball, what do you think we're kind of in store for this year?
Well, I don't think the AI noise is going anywhere. So I think more and more teams, whether they think it's the right thing for them or not, more and more in-house legal teams and lawyers generally will be encouraged to use AI tools.
Yeah.
That's often sort of mandated from the top. And
Yeah.
it's doing things, it's not just about doing things faster, but doing things more consistently, more accurately. I don't think certainly not within my career, hopefully, be in a place where lawyers are being replaced by AI. But there is definitely a very strong use case for using AI to help lawyers, to help do things more consistently, more accurately, be able to delegate more easily and ensure that
Yeah.
consistency and quality. And then free the lawyers up to do the more strategic matters, or the things that require a human element,
Mm.
advising the board or negotiating with a third party, those kind of things that you can't just chuck into a tool. So I that's obviously not going away. The uses of AI will increase. Hopefully the noise about it replacing lawyers will decrease, because I just think that's nonsense. And I think legal ops as a practice doesn't seem to be commonplace yet, and it really ought to be. And hopefully that will,
Have a bit
be
more of a driver.
Yeah, I just think there's, to be honest, before people look at hiring or tech or bringing in fractional people, I think the first step is to get their ops in order. Have a
Mm.
look at what they're doing, how they're doing it, whether they should be doing it at all, what people they've already got, what tools they already have access to in the business to better operate as a legal function. And then when you've kind of done everything you can on that front, you can start to look at,
Then
okay, here's a pain point. What technology's out there that
yeah.
or we've still got too much of this type of work? Is there a flexible legal resource option out there that we could use? Or, we've done everything we can. We absolutely still need to hire. So hopefully, there'll be a lot more focus on legal ops as well, not just
As part
bringing
of that.
tools or adding more people to a broken function or not efficient function.
Mm.
Um,
No, I think that's look. I
yeah,
agree wholeheartedly. I think on the AI side of things, there's a dual message here. There's the positive around, if the business is looking at technology investment for legal teams, that's inherently a good thing, because there's already some really good technology out there that enhances what lawyers do. The flip side to that, and I've heard this, and I'm sure you've heard it too, is the business is going, what's the phrase? Can't you just get AI to do that? Whatever it is, it's just the classic, and there's a classic kind of disconnect or misunderstanding as to what that technology, well, firstly, what it's currently capable of, really, but also what the point behind it is and what that does. I think that's
yeah.
interesting. And
There is
and yeah,
top
sorry.
down mandate of you need to use AI.
Yeah. Yes.
With
Exactly. And that's fine
no,
in and of itself, but only.
so I speak to lawyers. We've been told we must use AI, but we don't really know
Yeah.
what's there, what to use it for. Why would
Seems to be able
because
to unlock budget for that.
exactly.
If you can find a way to justify, well, okay, we'll invest in that tool, or we'll do this then.
Yeah, exactly. And those lawyers need to, or those in-house functions, great if you've got the budget and you're being told to use AI, but you need to
Mm,
identify the key pain point
support
first.
that.
what is the main problem that you need to solve? And that could, of course, result in procuring some sort of AI tool. It might not.
Yeah.
It might
Yeah. It might be something else.
might be something
Yeah.
else. Yeah. So
Yeah, that's exactly it. And to your final point on legal ops, I think a few years ago, I suppose specifically thinking on the UK market a little bit here, but we saw this in the US, we're seeing this in continental Europe now. There was a bit of excitement around legal ops, even just as a concept that's been around for years and years, especially in the
yeah,
US market. But the last years in Europe, it kind of started to build a bit of momentum of, there should be investment here, and we need some people that are good at this, and we need to build up this skill set. And it seemed to falter slightly. I think economic conditions, a few other things, it seemed to kind of get lost in focus a little bit. But I agree with you. It's not going anywhere. I
no.
think it would be ideal that we see more and more of it. And look, it's going to be, it's definitely going to be something that remains important for the in-house legal industry going forward, undoubtedly.
I just think it's very wrongly still seen by some as a nice to have,
So it's not
and it's
optional. Yeah,
not optional. It's not a nice to have. It's a must have. It's
it's
fundamental.
foundational.
It's
Yeah,
foundation to a successful in-house legal function. I've got friends and former colleagues that offer, they have their own legal ops consultancies, and there is still a bit of that. Oh, it's a nice to have. Not right now. We're too busy.
yeah.
Or you're not helping
Yeah,
yourself.
ironically, we're too busy
Yeah.
to look at our legal ops. Leave us alone. Yeah,
Yeah, actually, we just need someone to deal with these contracts, or actually, we're going to hire. It's
yeah.
like, hey, but there's something more you
Just
could
trying to
be
look
doing.
at the bigger picture.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. So
it's. I
hopefully,
completely agree.
hopefully, there's some improvement and growth there.
Yeah, yeah, and look, I think we'll see what happens. But look, I would happily sit here and talk to you all day. You know
Yeah,
that too. I thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It's always really interesting talking to people that sit at different cross sections of the industry and what they're doing. Best of luck with Allegro and the platform there and everything that you're doing. I'll make sure that appropriate links exist in various capacities on all of this. And look, I really appreciate your time. Have a wonderful day, and speak to you again very soon.
thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks
Good
so
to
much,
chat.
Rob.
Soon. Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.